We welcome our viewing audience again today for another episode. This is episode number 3 on God's plan for saving souls. With me is Stephen Dickey. Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
And Abdul, all the way from the Middle East, thank you for joining us. My name is Rudy Harnish, and this is really important to understand all this, how God's plan is to save souls. In this last episode, we went back to the beginning, how sin entered the world. And the interesting thing is we maybe didn't cover all this, but God provided even after their garments were stripped from them by Satan, this covering that we talked about, that they were then naked. God provided garments again. And the interesting thing is in the Torah, it mentions that God covered them with skins. Mm-hmm. So that's the first time when they saw death. And so an animal had to die. He didn't cover them with bark or with some other artificial clothes. He covered them with the skins of animals. And so the animal had to die, the blood had to shed, and it seems like that was probably the first sign of a sacrifice, that something had to die because they had sinned. And so we know that animals cannot atone for man's sin, but it showed a deep picture to Adam and Eve that sin causes death.
At some point in time, Adam named all those animals.
That's right. It's a good point.
And this was something that he had a part in. Whether it's how far down the lineage it was, we are not told, and not going to infer because no one knows. But it's just all of a sudden that was affecting what he had a part in. That God gave him the part of naming, and there had never been death before.
Yeah, that's very important because it tells us that both in the Quran and the Bible that Allah looked to Adam to name him.
That's right.
Very interesting.
Yep.
So when this animal, whatever it was, whether it was a lamb or whatever, when it had to die to cover them, that was a constant reminder. And the other thing I was thinking of, it had to be an incredible humiliation to Adam and Eve. They were first covered with light or with this covering, and then now they had to walk around with skins.
Right.
Incredible humiliation. But we continue on with the sanctuary service as we look at this very important topic. So this was the beginning of the sacrificial system, and then it was expounded on a lot larger at the time of Moses. It seems that God's people, the children of Israel at that time, had forgotten a lot of this. And I think that God brought them out into Sinai. We talked about that the first time. Mm-hmm. This is where that all came from, Saudi Arabia, where Mount Sinai is. And this is where God gave the instruction to Moses. And it wasn't done in Israel, it was done in Saudi Arabia, to represent that God cares for people of the whole world, regardless of who they are. And so this was God's plan so that we might know. So we look at the sanctuary, because we found out in a verse that we have previously covered, God's way is in the sanctuary. And so we want to look at the sanctuary again. It tells us there, as an introduction into the sanctuary, there was this outer court, there was the holy place, a smaller part behind the holy place was called the most holy place, or the holiest of holies. And then the chief figure there of the entire system was the high priest. There were other priests involved, but the main figure was the high priest. Here in Exodus 25:8 in the Torah, it tells us, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. This was God's purpose, because it seemed like the communication was, they no longer had this close communication between God and man after they sinned.
Right.
They would cause a separation. And yet God wanted to continue to communicate with mankind. But because man had sinned now, they could not come into the visible presence of Allah because they would be killed. And so God designed a system where he could still communicate with them out of his great love. He wanted to be in their midst. And so he designed the sanctuary system. And he was given instruction to Moses, let the children of Israel, make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them.
Yes.
So this is the introduction to the sanctuary. First of all, God commanded it, that Moses had to build it. or his workers, and that's found in Torah in Exodus 25, 1 through 9. There, how this was to be built. Secondly, it was to be a movable tent, so that as they went from place to place, God would continue to be with them in their presence in this tent. And the third point I want to bring out, God wanted to dwell among his people, the Israelites, in order to have fellowship with them. He did not want to be separated from them. He wanted to be with them out of his kindness and his love for us.
It's very hard for man to understand why God would want to be with sinners who've caused us trouble, but as you look at the Injil throughout, it shows about this love that you start seeing it being manifest, that he really cares. And the story here, you start to see this care becoming out more and more.
It seems like God is pursuing man. Man has walked away, and he forsook God because he listened to a stranger versus the Creator who gave him all these blessings. And yet God didn't turn his back on them. He sought them and he pursues us.
Yeah.
And that's a real, once we finally understand that God is pursuing us, that it really helps us because it helps us to know his care.
Yes.
So here's an overview of the sanctuary. And those of you that are watching, is an overview of the screen there. There's the gate off there to the one side, and then you have the bronze altar out front. You have the laver. You have the courtyard, the perimeter around it there, the courtyard fence. And you have the tabernacle tent or the sanctuary tent. This composes of the sanctuary. Now, each one of these articles here that we talked about here are very important, and we're going to look at them piece by piece because they have a lesson for us. There's a lot of symbolism in this sanctuary.
Yes.
And there, once we get inside the sanctuary tent, once we look at the holy place and the most holy place, we see the articles there of furniture. There's the golden lampstand. There's the table of showbread. There's the ark, the altar of incense. And then there's a veil. There's actually a veil at the very beginning. I should maybe say it's a curtain at the very beginning where the door was. And then there's now this second veil or this second curtain that separates the two parts, the holy from the most holy place. Mm-hmm. And then inside the most holy place, what was called the Ark of the Covenant. Now this phrase, the Ark of the Covenant, is found both in the Quran and in the Torah. And I was just amazed, as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian, I never knew that. But the Quran mentions it, and it mentions some of the sacrifices in the Quran. And where did that all come from?
Yeah.
Come back from to the Torah in order to understand that.
Yes.
So as we continue on with the introduction to the sanctuary and its courtyard were constructed according to the pattern set by Allah. He set the pattern, he set the agenda, you might say, for Moses to follow. And there was a reason for that as well, wasn't there? Yeah, there was a reason. We study the sanctuary to understand God's plan of saving souls. Because there's a lot of misunderstanding, isn't there?
Yeah. Everybody want to please God. Everyone want to be counted as a righteous person. But they don't have the full picture or the full plan to take them from point A to point B. So everybody is doing their own thing.
Right.
And they go off to different directions and different places, and they don't know where to go. And it's right in the middle of the Quran and in the Bible. Old Testament, the Torah, and in the New Testament, the Injil.
It's interesting that Cain, he wanted to worship God, but he wanted to do it according to his way.
Yeah.
And he brought his sacrifice according to his way. And so it's not that he didn't want to do something for Allah.
He wanted to please him, but his way.
His way.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't work that way.
And Adam and Eve, our first parents, when they discovered they were naked, they went and grabbed leaves.
Right.
So they want from their own work to cover themselves.
Yeah.
And it was not according to God's plan or God's method, you see.
We're talking about the Torah, Abdullah. Maybe we know that because we are in this business.
Yeah.
Maybe explain to a viewer, a Christian who maybe is watching, so what are those guys talking about? So what's the Torah refer to?
The Torah is considered to be the book that was given to Moses. And in it, the instructions that are given to God, by God to Moses, to the people, are to be given with strength and to be commanded to the people.
So that'd be Genesis and
Yes,
Exodus,
that's, yeah.
Leviticus, and
Yeah, these are the
Numbers and
5
Deuteronomy.
books, yes.
Yeah.
And they're called the 5 Pentateuch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Yes.
Very good.
I found out that Moses is mentioned 167 times. In the Quran.
Yeah, we mentioned that the first time.
Yeah, and so to
And
me that was
significant.
shocking.
Yeah.
Moses is mentioned that many times in the Quran.
Yes,
My.
it's a significant number, and it's an indication that there is something very important
Yes.
about what we're talking
Yes.
about now. This sanctuary, this sin, and the forgiveness of sin, and for a person to be considered righteous by God, by Allah. So how a person can do that without understanding and going to the Torah
Right.
and read it, to be able to say, okay, well, I want to please God. I don't want to do it my own way. I don't want to do it
That's
somebody
right.
else's way. I want to do it Allah's way.
Yeah.
And then you have to read and do a study like this one to be able to understand the sanctuary, the plan of salvation, what is this blood, why it's important, why it is considered a way for forgiveness of sin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the Christian who maybe would not knowingly mock the Quran, to have that biblical character mentioned that many times, and about these other things you're talking about, it would behoove us to at least consider and look at that.
That's right.
if we're not of the world of Islam.
Right.
In other words, this is a way, from what you're saying, is this is how God spoke to a group of people, was through this book, when the so-called scriptures that Christians look to were nailed on a wall in a monastery up in Europe.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Amazing.
What encouraged me too, Stephen and Abdul, is it encouraged me that it verifies or justifies the Bible, the Torah and the Injil. When I read all these verses in the Quran, that points to the Torah and the Injil. And I know there's some people out there that say they've been corrupted. But I go, God is able to protect His work.
Of course, He's the guardian of His word.
That's exactly
And that's
right.
what Quran says.
Yeah.
But Quran is saying that people have to be careful from the people who are saying it is from Allah when it is not from Allah. But it did not say that the Bible, the Torah, and the Injil are being corrupted, because that goes against what God first
Sure.
said. He's the guardian of His word. Be it the Quran or the Torah or the Injil, it's His word. God is warning His people to be careful from the people who are teaching it. And that's sort of what we're saying. People want to go from point A again to point B, but they're following different teachers and different people.
Yeah.
And they're straying away and far away from Quran, from the Torah, and from the Injil, and they're just doing it their own way to be able to please God, but they're strayed so far away from what God wanted them to do. And God is saying, come back and read the Torah, read the Injil, to be able to understand what is this plan that I wanted you to be righteous. I wanted you to come to me. I want to be with you. So as we were just saying, reading, that God said, build a sanctuary that I can be with them. So He want to be with us, all of us. And we are just saying, no, I want to follow teacher so-and-so, I want to follow imam so-and-so. And that's good. We all want to please God, as we mentioned, but we have to please Him His way. And that's the key point, is God's way, Allah's way, not my way or somebody else's way. We are human, we're trying to please God, and we are to be able to do that, we have to do a deep dive study in His Word, the Quran, the Torah, the Injil, and bring all this together to be able to put these pieces of puzzle together to complete the journey, to go to point B.
Yeah,
GPS,
GPS. there
God
we
plan
are again.
of saving souls.
You know, as a Seventh-day Adventist, I encourage all Muslims to
Yes.
really study the Quran.
Yeah.
I really do, because what I did is I just got a Quran. It was off the internet, and it was a free download, a Quran viewer.
Yes.
And in there, I could search the Quran on topics because I wanted to know, what the Quran says. And so here I'm finding all these verses that point back to the Torah
Right.
and the Injil, that Jesus was given, even Isa was given the Injil, to Moses was given the Torah.
Right.
So here we are studying this, and it is in the Torah that the sanctuary message was given to Moses, or Musa in Arabic. And the sanctuary shows how God is again communicating with mankind. He again reestablishing this communication that was lost. So as we continue on our introduction to the sanctuary was also a shadow of things in heaven. And that's an interesting point. That this sanctuary, if we could maybe put it in language of children. When our children were small, I built them a sandbox, filled it with sand, and they would play. They loved to play in this sandbox.
Yes.
And they'd have small homes and a barn and animals and so on. They'd love playing with that. God has designed this movable sanctuary we're talking about that he was giving to Moses. It was, if I can use the word, it was kind of a sandbox model, so that human beings could understand what God was doing. And so it's a shadow, but there's a greater sanctuary where?
Yeah, in heaven.
In heaven. And this one was patterned after the one that was in heaven.
Right.
So we might know God's ways. Also, the sanctuary foreshadowed or was symbolic of a redemptive work of Isa al-Masih. That's found in Hebrews 9.
Right.
It was a foreshadowing the redemptive work of Isa. And the third one point there is the real sanctuary is in heaven. We already talked about that, where Isa al-Masih, Jesus himself, is the high priest. So the earthly system had a high priest, had other priests as well, but it had a main high priest, and it had the sanctuary, the furnishings, and all that. This is going to be interesting as we continue on this study.
Why Jesus? Why Isa?
Yeah, good question.
I mean, it's in Islam, Isa al-Masih is considered a prophet, peace be upon him.
Right?
But in Christianity, he is considered to be the one who God chose from the creation of the world, as we are seeing right now, the sanctuary and this plan of salvation is started from the beginning, to be the one who is going to be fulfilling this ultimate forgiveness of sin.
The sacrifice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why Jesus? Why Isa? That's a question that boggles the Muslim mind.
Well, I think it's, you mentioned from my study of the books of Moses that the high priest was always a human being.
Yes.
And he was considered a wise person because they selected one that was a little older. And then as you're talking here about Isa al-Masih being in that position, and the reason he could be that because he was on this earth walking as a human being, as a man. And I think the Christian world doesn't really recognize that in its simplicity because they always want to make him a god, but yet he was on this earth as a human. The high priest was a human, and he took the place of the high priest in heaven because he knew the struggles that you and I have gone through. He knew the struggles he went through on this earth to resist the urges of sin. So as we continue, I think it's going to be very interesting to see of why and how, because that is essential. Because as what we're looking at here, this is how God is giving to the world in visual the plan of how to avoid hell, of how to see the kingdom of heaven is when Isa comes.
In my study, I found out that the high priest was chosen by God, but he chose Aaron. It was not he was not to be chosen by the people; he was to be chosen by God. So the interesting thing is that Isa al-Masih was also chosen by Allah to be the high priest. And this priest, as we find out in the sanctuary, the priests there were intercessors or mediators, mediating on behalf of the people.
I see.
Because the people could not come into the direct presence of Allah. And so the high priest was the only one who could come into the Shekinah, as we're going to find out later on, into the innermost Holy of Holies, to do the intercession. And so here, as we do this overall view of the sanctuary, the courtyard, there was a door. To enter into the courtyard of the sanctuary was a door. And the courtyard had this fence all around it. And right behind this courtyard was called the brazen or the bronze altar, where the sacrifices were made, were done. And also there was the bronze laver, where the washing was done. So we're going to cover each parts of these furniture pieces as we continue on. The first part, of course, into the sanctuary was the door. And that's found in the Torah, Exodus 27:16, and so on there. And the door, as you can see in this next slide there, was the only entrance into the sanctuary, the door. Really important. Because that represented something. Each one of the parts of the articles in the sanctuary represented something. It was symbolic, highly symbolic. And there you have the slide, the door coming in from the side there. And it's interesting that Isa al-Masih, Jesus himself, referred himself to as the door.
I see.
As the door, which is very interesting. He says in the Injil, John 10, verse 9, I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, it says. So Isa al-Masih said himself that he was the door to get into the sanctuary. Jesus himself refers to as the door. We already said that anyone entering through Jesus will receive eternal life. The Injil says that in John 10:9. So if we want eternal life, if we want to be in the gardens of bliss, if we want to someday recline on those cushions of green, Jesus, Isa, is the door.
And that door is the entrance to this righteousness
That's
that
right.
God wanted all human being to reach to.
That's right.
So that's why he said, I'm the door, I'm the way, and therefore, okay.
This study keeps getting better and better as we go along. There's so
Yes.
much more unfolded.
And it's the literal high priest again was that human being.
That's right.
And so God isn't putting us out where we can't reach it. Isa, or Jesus, was a human, had flesh and blood. We can relate to that as human beings.
right.
It isn't something out there we can't grasp a hold of.
I see.
He came close to us.
He
Yeah.
came close.
He identified himself with us as human beings.
one of us.
Whatever the word, in both the Quran and the Bible, Isa is called the word of Allah. And the word came and clothed himself with our fallen flesh upon
Right,
himself. He never sinned. It says in Surah 19:19 that he was born righteous, and we're going to cover that more and more as we go. But so here he came close to us to identify with us. The problem is with often people think that God is far away, that he's standoffish. He doesn't want anything to do with us until we perform something first. But we find out the exact opposite.
That's true.
God takes the initiative in our salvation. He's more concerned about our salvation than we even are about our own.
That's true.
That's the God we serve, the Creator, Allah. He's so good to us. Well, we looked there at the courtyard fence. It was quite high. You couldn't look over it. It separated the outside world from the sanctuary inside, but there was one opening. And we can be really thankful for that opening, can't we?
Yes.
God has provided a way back into the kingdom of heaven. And according to the Injil, Jesus is that opening. Well, the courtyard fence, you can see it there as the red arrow points it out. It was all the way around the sanctuary, and it kept the outsiders or whatever out, and then there was just the one door there to get into the sanctuary. Next, as you entered into the courtyard through the door, there was this bronze altar. And as we are going to find out, this is where they took the sacrificial animals to be slain and to be sacrificed for God.
Yes.
And as you can see from the red arrow there, this is the first article of furniture as you walked in through the door of the sanctuary. That's where it was, the bronze altar. There's another red arrow that shows it in more detail there.
Right. So not everybody can be a high priest by themselves. Just go and grab a lamb or a sheep or a calf and slaughter it and be accepted by God. Then you become your own door, by the way.
I see.
Yeah, it sounds like that to me. If you decide to just grab a lamb and slaughter it, and
You had to go according to God's plan.
you have to go according to God's plan. And that explains the fence
That's right.
and the door.
Okay.
There's only one door, one person to go in.
There's no back door.
And there's
Yeah,
no back
okay.
door, there's no multiple doors.
Right.
There's a fence and one high priest. So not everybody can be a high priest on their own.
That's right.
It has to be chosen by God, and a person have to come to God's plan to reach that righteousness.
Here in this slide, it shows a sinner has come in, and what this was all about is if somebody was convicted that he had sinned. Maybe he did some, maybe he stole something, or maybe he told a lie to his neighbor or something, and he came under conviction, oh, I sinned. And this is displeasing to Allah. So that what he had have to do, he'd have to bring an animal. But what kind of an animal? Could he bring anything that was walking around out there?
You can bring a
Good
lamb.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring a lamb.
And the thing about that, when you read this, how far or how large the tents were, and this man, and it was a man who brought this. He couldn't send his wife with it. If his wife had sinned, the husband is the head of the family. He represented his whole family, so he would have to bring, and all the neighbors would see, oh, he has sinned,
Right?
I see.
and
Humiliating, wouldn't
humiliating,
Yeah.
Going to the sanctuary.
condemning,
it? Yeah,
Oh, okay.
and
With a lamb.
you'd
It's a
have to
sinner.
bring the lamb down there.
yeah.
And you think about all of the sheep that were in the tribes there, they didn't have fences, but they knew the voice. They'd call that lamb by the name, and that lamb would come. The rest of the sheep wouldn't move, of the neighbors. Just think about that. This is a sheep that he raised, that
That's right.
knew his voice, and he was going to have to kill that lamb.
So that's what they did. They brought it to this altar where the life was taken. We covered our first series that one of the reasons that blood was not to be eaten is because the life is in the blood, and the blood was only supposed to be for the atonement, for atoning. So here, the sinner who came under conviction, he had to take the life of the lamb, and he had to confess his sin over the head of the lamb. But something very interesting happens is one of the priests, not the high priest here, but one of the priests would take some of the blood in a bowl and carry it into the first compartment of the sanctuary. And we're going to talk about that some more down the road. But this is where the sacrifices were done here at the altar. There were several kinds of offerings were made on the bronze altar. There was the sin offerings that we talked about. If a person was under conviction that he'd done wrong, he would bring the lamb, or a bull, or a goat. It had to be without blemish. There could be you couldn't bring one with a broken foot, or if there was some other physical deformity, you had to bring the best that you had. And it had to be a male. Interesting, isn't it? But now you also could bring, if you were really poor, you could bring birds, two pigeons. You could bring those for the sin offering. And the sacrifice was necessary for forgiveness of sin. And the blood of the animal was for the atonement for sin. This was God's plan in the Torah in the very beginning. So we can understand a little bit, people might wonder, well, how does this all work? Well, this is God's plan, how he And it all foreshadowed something more as we continue on in our study. Sin, because sin was serious, and only shed blood, which stands for life, could pay for sin. But it couldn't just be anyone's life. It had to be the Word of Allah, who gave himself for us in the form of Isa al-Masih. Here it says in the Torah 17:11, Leviticus, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you on the altar to make an atonement for your souls. It is the blood that makes an atonement for the soul." So here we have it. This is one of the most important verses we can find in the Torah, is God's method of how to deal with this sin issue. The sacrifice was made, and it was the blood that was to atone for the soul. A question I have is, could the blood of animals really atone for the sins of mankind? Or was this symbolic?
Well, God said, the sanctuary is a shadow.
That's right,
It's just a replica of what's in heaven.
right.
So it's not being the ultimate thing, I think.
So we're going to find out as we continue on. Stephen, you have something?
When you move into the New Testament or the Injil, one of the names that Jesus or Isa has is the Lamb of God, Lamb of Allah. So there again, that's figure that he was taking the place of this lamb as a human being. And so to answer your question, there's patterns, shadows, all this is it all point to that Isa was going to take the place of that lamb.
Yeah.
Very interesting. All of this is extremely interesting, and just glad you could join us, both of you, as we continue this, because I'm learning a lot as I'm studying this. It's just a pleasure to know God's will in this entire system of how he's seeking to bring us back into heaven again. So I just want to thank you for joining us today, and all our viewers. I want to ask God's blessing upon you, as well as you continue to watch these programs. And we just ask you to join us again next time. Thank you for being with us.